Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the October Bike Ped Trails Commission meeting. And Kay, you'll note who's here, right? I think, oh, Chris might be just rolling up too. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting?
I can make a motion to.
Okay, we have Ted made a motion and seconded by Alex. Is there any discussion about that? No? Approval? Anybody approve? Did you approve? You must, because you motioned, so I think we have approval for those minutes, Kay. Hey, Chris. Sign in as we get going here. Here to speak, you're just observing, you have nothing you want to bring up? Okay. Okay. Hey, Chris.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, just in time. Anything, Chris, you got for us on updates from the trustees that relate to bike ped issues?
Yeah, well, the number one biggest issue for sure has to do with this ongoing land use application at the corner of the bike path and 133 and across the way from Dolores Way entrance exit. And there's been a lot of public comment at the last meeting about it. And there was some trustee request for some mitigation fee or something like that. I don't know if any of it, I can't remember exactly the specific
Right.
things that they're proposing. There's a major concession they made it on in terms of undergrounding power, which is a separate part of the.
But yeah, I wasn't at the meeting, but from what I've heard, it's sort of an issue of concern further clogging up the ingress and egress out of Satank.
Yeah, it was most of the people were Satank people talking about how difficult it is to make a left turn out of that place and or left turns into it for that matter.
Right.
And then generally expanding that to some degree, I would say, to the like pedestrian crossing, jaywalking situation happening where the bike path hits Highway 133.
Yeah. Okay.
But the restaurant, in terms of statistics, contributes a really minuscule amount of the overall traffic at that intersection. So it's hard to legitimize necessarily penalizing them specifically for every. Well, it's clearly a shared traffic problem.
So is it in the category of a 133 issue, really? It's
totally a 133 issue, and it's, Dolores Way has always been a problem forever. There was 2013 stuff about it. I think there was to 1998 there was stuff about it.
Yeah, and I think the original agreement with CDOT called for some kind of right in, right out, but some other way to access that. I don't remember what that was. Yeah, there was. Do you remember what it was? It was in order to make it right in, right out. There must have been some other roundabout or something.
I think the idea is right out, not right in, but right out only.
Right out.
So you'd have to make a right out and go down to supposedly to the Industry Way roundabout and loop around and come back.
Right.
But you'd still have to let people make a left turn in because there's no other
because I don't think
way to get into there.
Yeah, I don't think there was anything in the plan that would allow you to.
There's no good place to turn around, I guess.
Yeah, to not make a left-hand turn, right? Right, is that?
So the access control plan actually has a full movement intersection a little bit closer to Dolores, which is at the entrance by Grand Junction Pike, like to Dos Gringos in the public workshop. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the trigger of when Dolores or this entrance would get changed.
Well, I know you guys, the trustees, are struggling with that issue. I'm sure trying to deal with it. It seems to me it's just one more example of trying to deal with 133 as a
Yeah,
holistic issue, right?
yeah, and I mean, I think it's just very expensive. All the, a
Right.
lot of the real solutions are really expensive.
Really
And so, and it's hard, it's the nastiest problem we have, but it's not compared to some other places. It's probably not that high on CDOT's list
Right.
of priorities.
Right.
But I still think we have a chance to get grants and things for sure, if we can put together a plan around it or whatever.
Right.
And I don't know how comprehensive that is. I mean, this map thing, I think, is still a level above that in terms of,
That level of detail.
and we've done it piecemeal with the roundabout at Industry Place and maybe as traffic crossing and the existing roundabout and I don't know if it's
Right.
probably too much to swallow all at once.
So I'm sorry, Chris, are you guys still trying to solve the problem, or have you approved the project?
The project has not been approved. We continued it, and there'll be a meeting tomorrow, so y'all are welcome to come and make public comment if you want
Yeah.
about it. And there was just a series of points of discussion having to do with undergrounding that power, which is required by Excel to go all the way to Village Road. And so there was some cost share with us for the portion that's not actually their frontage.
I got you.
And then there was some questions around interpreting the UDCs. There's some things where there's like districts that are next to each other that there's no prescription in the code for what is the setback between a transit zone district and this CW wholesale district. And I think there were two examples, and one of them was like 40 feet, which would basically mean the whole property was in a setback,
Oh,
or the other one has 0 base. So it's sort of kind of had to be made up by the planner.
yeah. Okay.
But, and the site is complicated and tricky and just doesn't really lend itself that well to
All right.
having a good
Yeah.
traffic solution.
It is
but
that for sure.
That's the deal on that. That's the main thing. I'm trying to think what else we have going on.
Chris, could I jump in real quick?
Yeah,
The thing that they propose that'll be kind of on the table tomorrow night as it relates to bike ped is actually purchasing another WeCycle station to put right there. And then sponsorship and maintenance for like 10 years or something like that.
Oh, the developer is talking about doing that.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, so
Okay.
I think you all are welcome to come to that meeting and make public comment if you have a personal opinion on it. But clearly the issue is much bigger than just this one project. And I think it has been a little bit of more of a continuing to spur the collective sense of urgency around.
Yeah.
33 sort of in general.
It's just another point of
Yeah,
why we need to address things on 133, right?
yeah.
So can I just ask, so who's the responsibility for continuing to move the ball? Is it the contractor that's got to pursue those questions that are still up in the air?
In
Who's
which
your-
case, like for like the whole intersection or?
Yeah, the whole thing, figuring out the cost sharing aspect. I mean, there was some differences of, 50-50 versus 25-75, whatever. How does that get pursued as it's being?
Well, it sounds like it's not being pursued. It sounds like they're proposing an alternate form of this WeCycle station as an alternate form of supposedly to balance out essentially.
Wasn't
what
that
they
going to
would
go
pay
in behind on the
us.
backside, on the Rio Grande Trail side of the facility, of the building?
What about it?
The WeCycle station, my
I think
impression.
it would be, I don't know, but I would assume it would be sort of at the end of the triangle probably,
Yeah.
but.
I think there's a path that comes out of there kind of toward that point on the triangle. That's where it would make the most sense because you could capture the Crystal River Trail and the Rio Grande right there.
But that's not gonna have a major impact on the intersection and the turning, the automotive.
I mean, the
traffic.
main argument to it is that having the station there does mean that anybody within town is gonna use a WeCycle presumably to get to the restaurant rather than a vehicle.
Right.
which is not gonna mean fewer cars turning in and out of that parking lot, but, yeah, so I don't know, the magnitude of the problem is a lot larger than their contribution to it, so that's what's tricky is, and we don't really have the plan in place where we can plug them right in and say, you do this or whatever, but, so.
Any questions or
Yeah,
for Chris?
I'm wondering, Chris, in relation to budgeting for next year, are there any bike ped transit 133 issues are percolating as priorities for the trustees?
Well, yeah, good point. We will have their first budget discussion tomorrow night as well, and we're gonna do some individual trustee, finance director, one-on-ones or whatever to talk about, to just answer questions about the budget. And I mean, one of the biggest ones obviously is the downtowner, continuing that. That's a huge investment. I think that's in the budget currently. I think there is some allocation for, I don't know what is there, is there allocation for more streetscape stuff, like another crosswalk or something?
I'm not sure whether it's in what you're talking about tomorrow, because I think that's just a general fund.
Okay,
But we are planning on including funding to get some of the crossings that we've talked about, whether it be at East Atlantic, whether it be up at Went. It just to bring a little bit of, I'll say, reality to this discussion. That will likely be design and permitting for next year and construction the following year.
those
Just-
are more complicated projects.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're going all the way across the highway. That isn't something that our crew could do like we did out here. And if you start designing it in January and then working with CDOT on the permitting and the design, you're looking at probably midsummer before you get that approval. And that time, the contractors are all busy. And if you want to pay twice as much for it, you can, but it's probably a better option to just wait till January or February of the following year and bid it to be constructed in 26.
What about any of the like more pilot projects that have been in the map plan so far? Is there potential for budget
Like
on
say
some of
Hendrick or
those,
something, or
was it tactical urbanism style things where we could, whether it's
it
on
would be
Hendrick?
nice to have some kind of, even just like a striping budget or something. You could do some stuff with that.
We have money in the budget where we could accomplish that.
Pilot
Yes.
program, yeah.
Yep.
You know, on this, I'll say it again, and you know, I don't want to be the person to slow any projects down. I do really think it's a mistake to start designing, planning a crosswalk without discussing with CDOT everything that we hope to accomplish for 133 in terms of making crossing safer and slowing traffic, right?
Well, it does bring up an interesting question there of like, if this is gonna be this hugely long drawn out design process to do one crosswalk, is there some argument to be made to try to do a design that, like, what is the level of magnitude higher to try to do a design that, or like a permitted design that includes a whole stretch from, say, includes what happens at Sopris Avenue and East Atlantic and.
Yeah, and let's make sure that if we put a crosswalk and it meets all our objectives, not just drop in another crossing it, you know?
I don't know if you actually save money and you just spend way more on design costs and
Right.
have to refine it anyway, but.
You're probably, you're probably gonna spend quite a bit more because from a permitting perspective, CDOT wants to not see just a concept. They want to see, okay, what are the right of way impacts and those sorts of things. So if you expand that out, you probably are talking about quite a bit more money and time. And that's not an argument for or against it. It's just the reality. You know, if we had a concept of, okay, you know, look, in this section, say you pick from Industry to Went, we think we want to do this here, this here, this here, and this here. then I think you could have that general conversation with CDOT, and they could, when they're reviewing the individual projects, they could go, oh, well, maybe it makes sense to put the ped crossing on this side of whatever road you're picking,
Mhm.
because you're either coming into or you're going out of a roundabout, and we don't like having them, that close.
Yeah, no, I
you
think
could-
that's the right discussion, right? Because I think one, you might run out of political goodwill with CDOT if we keep coming at them, right? And that we might make mistakes. If I knew you wanted to do that, I would have, right? So, I think
Having that
as we're
timeline.
budgeting and we're trying to finalize map, I think it's good to keep that in mind.
Mhm.
Okay.
So I'm trying to think what else might be of note in our, think of anything else, Kevin, that,
No. Oh, yeah, there's an EV charging grant going in from Clear.
Oh,
oh,
good.
right, yeah.
Great. Hey, Ellie.
And yeah, that's for the whole of Garfield County, but I think they have designated sites mostly in different towns in the county. And so I think are designated one, and it's a level 3 or something charger. I think at the moment it's going over, the perspective idea was it would go next to the other one. that's
Infrastructure's all in place, right? I mean,
At Valero or whatever.
yeah.
And I think it also has to do with being in Holy Cross territory. Does that have something to do with it, or
I'm not completely plugged into where we're at on that.
unintended?
Yeah.
But I can tell you that dual charging stations actually charge faster than like if there was one there and one downtown. They're interconnected, and they can actually,
Oh, really? Interesting.
that's what I've been told with those charge point chargers. But like putting 2 of them there would more than double the charging ability. Not in number of cars, but speed.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very good argument for doing that. And it's the low hanging fruit, I guess. I know the e-board, we discussed it, and maybe we discussed it here too. There's a desire to see something downtown upgraded to like a higher level charging too, as it's a good, Chamber of Commerce business development thing in terms of
It's
the amount of
nice as
activities
a
that one
person who
can
uses them from that perspective, it's nice to be able to plug in for a half hour and
go to the
get
smithy
lunch or walk
whatever, yeah.
around and,
Grocery shop.
support Main Street business. What?
Yeah, and if they're downtown, they would be an attractant to people coming to
Right.
go, oh, that's a nice spot for me to hang out while charging.
Cool. Okay, good.
But that's, that's just one charger or whatever, and I don't know who that's to, the state or something.
I believe it is a state grant.
Mhm. Yeah, I know off of I-70, there's like a handful of like CDOT sponsored, state sponsored, like I know in Rifle, there's a couple and yeah, they all level 3. So I feel like from a tourism standpoint,
Mhm.
I would say it would make more sense to bring them to Main Street rather than maybe is that like off the Cowan Center?
I think there's a huge amount of investigation has to go into what the power supply is
Yeah,
and where that comes
That's
from.
a whole different.
I can tell
discussion.
you, we looked at putting one at the launch pad about 4 years ago. And it was tremendously expensive
Yeah.
because of the upgrades that would be necessary. Excel, Holy Cross,
Mhm.
they're both fine. I'm not picking one, but I think they were having to upgrade lines and actually, I want to say there was a transformer cost of $50,000 or $60,000 to get 3-phase at the launch pad that could handle that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not. Okay.
Cool.
Okay, no other questions for Chris. Thank you, Chris. Hey, Kevin, on the next item, this has been in front of the town forever. I know a lot of the people on the commission, are have been new to town, never mind the commission since this was, and it's come up a lot. So I thought it'd be good if we just spent 5 or 10 minutes. If you could just sort of remind us all like where this started and you know, where we're at on the Industry Way roundabout?
I don't honestly know if I can tell you where it started.
Okay.
I'll give you what I've got. And Chris has some history here too,
I can
I'm
tell you
sure.
some stuff too, sure.
You know, there actually used to be, and I'm basing this on longtime resident discussions that I've had, as well as some old aerial photography. There used to actually be a connection from 8th Street over toward Highway 133.
You mean
Back in the day.
in that vicinity of Industry Way?
South side of the railroad corridor
Mhm.
going west
Okay,
toward the highway.
yep,
You know, the reconnection, and that's what I'll call it even, or the connection, however you want to view it. It's been talked about for at least 24 years.
I didn't think it went back that far.
Well, in 2000, the town actually hired SGM to do a study to come up with 4 different alignments to get Industry Way connected over to 8th Street. You know, I looked at some of the original traffic studies for Cleveland Place. There was actually a proposal for Cleveland Place that got withdrawn, but it actually showed a connection of industry on it.
Okay,
So, you know, you have that, the actual plat of Cleveland Place up in the northwest corner, there's a platted part of open space. And on the plat, it says that it's dedicated to the town for public roadway uses, parentheses, Industry Place.
Where is it? Which part is this?
So if you're closest to the Rio Grande Trail and furthest west, it kind of comes to a point up there. It would be behind the Habitat for Humanity house that's down at the end of that road.
Mhm.
Right before you get
Right.
to 8th
This
Street.
is on 8th Street. This is.
No,
that
no, no, no.
court
It's on the back side of Cleveland Place.
next to the digs or whatever, that building, underground building kind of, or
I,
Aspen Earth Moving or whatever.
I think that's where he's talking about, yeah.
yeah, I mean, if you can picture the plat kind of comes from the south and it goes up and hits the Rio Grande right of way, and then it goes this way.
Okay.
And there's
Yeah.
this point up here, and there's about 40 feet of that corner reserved for, and it says
To
for
allow
Industry
the
Place.
Industry Way to come across the Rio Grande, then go up the north side and connect, yeah.
If it connects it.
Very close to there.
Yeah.
So, you know,
We don't have the rights though to cross the railroad right of way again. We'd have to negotiate with Raft about that again, wouldn't we?
correct.
So,
And we'd probably have to negotiate with RAFTA on property.
Wasn't there a whole
crossing.
thing with RAFTA, it coincided with RAFTA moving some of their storage stuff there, and I thought there was a lot that had to happen with RAFTA in terms of the location they have. They might abandon some of that at some point.
I think it was more not getting the cart too far ahead of the horse and like bisecting that big chunk of RAFTA property in case they wanted to use it for future housing or things of that nature.
Yeah, so whatever, RAFTA's heavily involved in whatever happens, yeah.
I think that piece of property has hugely significant in the, down the road. And Rafta, what appears to me is it's like sort of half abandoned at this point.
Yeah.
Anyway, and they're planning to make significant investments in their facility in Glenwood. And it seems like it's sort of the dead bus yard before stuff gets sold off.
Okay,
So, but I don't think they've made any plans or anything about it, and theirs was much easier, like quicker ways for them to build housing and just convert motels in Glenwood.
Right.
So they didn't want to go down the whole process of like redeveloping this property, but I think down the road, those would go hand in hand. Originally, I think in the more recent history was that when the Seedale Industrial Park first came up for redevelopment in 2008 or something, 2006 maybe, right before the crash. And there was a huge amount of discussion about at that point, the council wanted that developer to pay for the connection through from Seedale Industrial Park to pay for that connection through to Industry Way. And I don't think they were intending to make them pay for the roundabout, but that was sort of the assumption, was that there's like this whole outlet essentially for the redevelopment of that whole area essentially.
Is that, so, yeah, that's the other half of the question we pose is I guess it goes back so far. I'm not sure what the initial thought was, but you said, you know, as recently as 2008 or 9, they were thinking as that industrial park gets redeveloped, that there would be a density issue there would cause a lot of traffic that need a way in and out. Is that kind of where we were?
I mean,
Guess-
at that point in time, but if this was already discussed by the town back in 2000 and they paid an engineer to come up with
So they've been,
studies.
yeah, they've been talking about it for a long time. So I'm wondering what the thought was behind having it. Like, you know, somebody comes up to me and says, why do we need it? I'm not sure if we've lost track of what that original intent was.
It might spring from a little bit more of an automobile minded thinking process. And it is a sort of an annoying, it feels annoying just from like a planner's perspective in a certain sense to have all those dead ends and things, and like
Oh, yeah.
probably contributes to more traffic on 133 because so many people they can't get through to other parts of town. So there's like an assumption that your network, having a better network, you know, you have more options for people to go places and they don't clog in the remaining places as much. So I think that's been the main argument about it. But I know that there is significant neighbor unrest that would occur if that was to be brought back up for discussion. I know that there are people opposed to the idea of it, who've become accustomed to the idea of that little area with the sagebrush being the like kids' playground or whatever. So
Yeah, I guess it's nice that it's been planned for in a way, because if you know, north of town gets developed to high density, there might be a need actually for another outlet. But
my feeling is I don't really care that much about the automobile crossing, but I think you could upgrade the bike connection a lot better, not have to go up that steep hill. In the meantime,
Mhm.
that wouldn't take any big process nearly as much to.
right.
That would be, I guess, the assumption is that then you can have a lot of bike traffic. I would just share Industry Place back to the 8th Street for a lot of
Yeah.
people. But
And then
I would
sorry,
just
go
say
ahead, Alex.
then
Yeah.
that opens a whole can of worms of making industry a bit more bike friendly. Like I would not, I mean, it's not the busiest road, but
not
It's-
bike friendly either, no.
yeah.
I mean,
Well, to the extent we're thinking about long-term planning, and someday that might be residential and retail, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's, Kevin, I don't mean to cut off your presentation. You were talking about the history, which was, you know, a couple of years ago, you were working on creating the space, the geography for the roundabout. That was really something that was happening, I guess, separating the roundabout from the Industry Way in extent, right? The roundabout wasn't only for an Industry Way connection. It was also for 133 control.
133 control traffic exiting City Market, so everybody didn't have to
Yeah.
go north to the roundabout at Main Street. Just real quick. if I
Yeah, but yeah,
can.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, you know, we were talking about long-term planning. Both the 2013 comp plan and the 2022 update to that mentioned specifically a vehicular and pedestrian connection over to 133 along Industry Place. So it's not like some old concept that is just getting resurrected. I mean, it was reaffirmed, if you will, back in 2022 by that process. I'm not advocating for it. I went through the
Yeah.
history.
Did they know City Market was going in at that time?
In 2022?
Well,
well, there's
no,
been an
no,
assumption something was
in
gonna happen there.
2013, when they first brought it up. Yeah, huh?
Well, it had gone through the process multiple times and
Right.
I think the writing was probably a little bit on the wall at that point in time, because there was a bigger, like, big box proposed
that would be a-
development.
Do you think that would be a popular concept to make Industry Way more pedestrian biker friendly, to use that as a cut through to connect to that area of 133.
I think it was identified for all modes of traffic.
Yeah.
Whether
Yeah.
it's vehicles, bikes or peds, but anyway.
So
And then,
that's those are important things, because you said the comp plan in 13 and the update of 22
Yeah.
both had that
Yeah.
vehicular connection concept
Yeah.
of Industry Way in.
vehicular and pedestrian.
Vehicle, pedestrian, yeah, everything right, okay.
Yep. And then, 2022 was when we started looking at the design of the actual roundabout, which gets to your question of where we're at with that right now. Is we have the preliminary design done. CDOT signed off on the geometrics of it, which allowed us to get to the point right now where we can identify right-of-way needs.
Okay.
So mainly we just have to buy a triangle from the co-op and a triangle from Terry, or who's the guy who owns the
So
stone?
right
Sandstone
now, I
Plaza or
don't
whatever.
think we'll even need much of a triangle from the co-op because we kind of shifted it to the northwest in that intersection. So it would go on that last undeveloped lot would be where we would probably acquire.
Okay, so you could buy, it's the whole thing's just shifted a little, the whole street just goes a little bit over to use that right of way on the other side.
Yeah.
That's
and
great.
That actually creates non-linearity to that 133, which will slow people down regardless of how you're coming into it. So it seemed kind of like a win-win.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're kind of piecing our way towards, with design and approvals towards a plan anyway with CDOT. I mean, that's a big piece of it, what we eventually want to do.
Yeah. And, I guess what I would say is, part of the impetus behind getting something started there was, we can argue about amounts as much as we want to, but there were traffic impact fees paid by the city market. Not just city market, but all those pieces in there. But the city market deal, development improvement agreement, I guess I should call it, not a deal, did say we had to return their money if we hadn't started using it within 11 years. And so this is, I think it's worthwhile. It's identified as a full access intersection. Whether we choose to build it now or 5 years from now, I think almost like we did at this other side where we bought the house on 8th Street and we got some easements from the folks that built the townhouses so we could make that connection. I think it'd be pretty smart right now to try to acquire that right away for the roundabout versus waiting until something's built there. Because I can tell you the initial, like taking the Main Street roundabout and just moving it down there, the lanes out of the roundabout were like 2 feet from the First Bank building.
So but the land was, they already dedicated a certain amount of land, but just not quite enough, basically.
Correct.
But you don't feel like we're getting gouged trying to buy that additional right of way that we need to actually do the project.
I mean,
Because effectively we're paying them back money that they gave to us too.
There's so many ways that the land piece of this could happen. I don't know. I'm getting, what's the skiing metaphor, out over my tips here a little bit. But I think that depending on the cost of the right-of-way acquisition, I'm wondering if we shouldn't be actually talking about that whole parcel. I think there's opportunities outside of transportation and bike ped things that could happen on the remainder. And once something's built there, it's gonna be there.
What parcel are you talking about?
It's directly north of the First Bank.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's one parcel left in there north of what would be Industry Way going straight across.
Yeah.
And, It's this balance. It's what Chris gets to deal with every 2 weeks, if not more frequently. It's like, what do you do? But I do think there's opportunities, and when you can accomplish multiple things at the same time, I think that's a pretty wise use of public money.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
that's interesting.
yeah, you know, it's interesting, I think, to separate the roundabout and the industry way connector. I mean, the roundabout, I'm sure, is designed to accommodate an industry way connector, but just because the roundabout happens doesn't mean industry way is going to happen.
No,
And it might be good as our plan, it might be good to revisit the industry way connector and try to understand what the support is for that, you know, but that's just an aside thought. And you know, as I'm preaching about trying to go to CDOT with, you know, I don't know if it's going to look exactly like this, but this is kind of what we want to accomplish, is what we're thinking about. Help us figure it out. You know, we designed a crosswalk that we could slot in somewhere. We have a roundabout designed already, and almost, you know, a couple more components of that. We're almost done anyway, right? So it's great that those things are moving, and it makes me think too, as you said, you know, 6 months ago, we were talking about getting a grant for Safe Streets for All, that, you know, maybe we're actually pretty close to being able to figure out how to apply for that grant for the roundabout.
And can I put one question out to Kevin? The connection from the roundabout to, let's say, the city market parking lot, is there a right of way that exists that would connect those two?
Yes, there's both an east-west right of way for industry and a north-south right of way for, people probably don't know it because there's not much on it, but that road that goes north and south between the bank and the lumberyard is called Parker Drive. So there is right of way for both of those.
Okay,
but
David?
yeah, that would be the major outlet for, that's the main reason for the roundabout, is to outlet traffic out of the city market and
right.
not force them around the roundabout.
Wait, can I ask one clarifying question? So just to make sure I'm clear on that, so that like current northern exit will no longer be like the main exit in that area. You'll instead go around the first bank, like around the back side of the first bank and exit over there.
If you're trying to go left, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. I was confused about that before.
You know, give you another way to get out and circle more quickly to head out of town,
Yeah.
right? You know, it's interesting. You mentioned it's always been about traffic, especially with the lumberyard, big trucks coming out of there. I don't know how much of a problem the town thinks we have right now, given that that's not all the way developed, but a lot of the heavy traffic use is in there. And I don't know if the roundabout is maxed out and we really need one for that. I've always thought of the roundabout almost as much about a safe crossing as I have about, you know, traffic mitigation in and out of there.
I think the advantage of a roundabout really comes down to if you think you need to do some sort of full intersection control, your options, there's basically three: an all-way stop,
Mhm.
function 2 on Highway 133, a traffic signal, which actually has to meet specific warrants that probably wouldn't be met. There's 9 different ones. And even if you meet those warrants, the MUTCD says you should try to do something different before you do that. And a roundabout is one of the things that they say is okay.
Yeah, I guess given, I agree with you. I'm just wondering if we need the traffic mitigation. You know, I guess, Chris, it's something maybe trustees would think about. I don't know if it's always been there, right? We're going to do a roundabout because traffic mitigation, eventual connection with industry way, and crossing. But it's a really expensive project. And now that the lumberyard and city market and a lot of that stuff has been up and running, I don't know how much of a traffic problem we have.
And I think it depends on who you ask.
Yeah, and is it, yeah, and is it, but relative to the benefit you might get, given the costs, and, maybe we should plan it and wait till Industry Way gets done and then put in a crossing. I don't know, there might be another way to look at that. Rather than assuming we need it for traffic mitigation, I guess, is just a thought that occurs to me.
My mind, the planning and the easement acquisition strikes me as something we shouldn't wait to do. So you have the option, at least of doing like the easement acquisition in particular, you don't have that cost would just continue to go up probably, especially, I don't know if it gets developed or whatever, but the actual building of it, yeah, maybe it doesn't, maybe it's not gonna.
I agree. There's no reason to stop
Like,
that now, because you might need it eventually, especially it might be more of an Industry Way thing. I don't know. I just, having this discussion, it just occurred to me. I mean, I actually had somebody say to me a couple of weeks ago, they said, I expected there'll be a lot more trucks given the lumber yard, but I drive through there and walk through there and bike through there, and I haven't seen, trucks have not been my issue with 133. I don't know if any of you guys have
it
any
might be
other
an
thoughts on
early
that.
morning phenomenon. for the
What's
most
that?
part. They might be a first thing in the morning phenomenon. for the
Yeah,
most part.
yeah, that's what they did say, it would be all before we woke up.
I do think that the mix of uses there is probably made it right now
Mhm.
because of different times of day that people go to the different things that are there.
Yeah.
I don't know if Kevin's microphone is on.
It is. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. I was just saying that I think that the mix of uses out there is probably put us in the best position we can be in for the impacts to everybody. I'm usually here 6:30, 15 minutes one way or another in the morning. And what I've noticed, and I'm not complaining about it because I lived near Minneapolis for a while, so that doesn't really bother me, but the gaps to get out onto the highway early in the morning have really become less frequent. And I think that partially is a function. I think what we've done is we've like extended that, I wouldn't call it a rush hour, but just it's kind of hard to get out of here, even making a right-hand turn, like coming out of
Yeah,
Public
it's 6:30,
Works.
give or take in the morning.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that goes from that point until probably 8:30 or 9, where it is difficult to come out of
Right.
and make even a right-hand turn. Left hand is really challenging because you got to have a gap from both directions.
But
And
that's
again,
not
I'm
a-
not complaining about it.
No, I understand. That's not necessarily a marketplace problem though, right? Or is it?
I think that some of that traffic is folks going to the lumber yard early in the morning to pick up the stuff they need to head out and do their jobs.
Right. Okay. Well, it's something to think about as we plan 133. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any questions for you guys on that stuff? Good. Hey, Kevin, I have a little bit of time slotted in here just to get the group together on things we've been working about for MAP. Can you just tell us what the plan is for November meeting with regard and with FHU going forward?
Yeah, so first off, the November meeting for Bike Ped will be at the 3rd Street Center in that big room because it's the day before the election and this room's closed.
Okay.
That'll, in the big room up there, it'll also accommodate we're gonna have the draft of MAP, the latest draft out, hopefully by the 18th of this month to everybody for review prior to that meeting. That's gonna go to you guys, the Park and Rec Commission, the E-Board, and Planning and Zoning, and they will be invited to attend at that as well to kind of share comments about that. Then that should give folks on the separate commissions an opportunity either at their December meeting or January meeting to formulate recommendations for the board, and it'll probably go to the board at the second meeting in January. So that's kind of.
Okay, so as we await the third draft, and I guess this is where I would love some just thoughts, because I know we've kind of met in smaller groups and had some discussions about, I think we agreed that one of the things we sense was missing from MAP was a way to connect the guiding principles, the objectives, or the guiding principles to specific objectives that would then connect to specific work items. So I think, this, actually this, the second attachment in here, Group B map, Carbondale top line, was kind of a list that we've all cobbled together over the months of things that we thought would be objectives to help meet those guiding principles. And then the second attachment is just my attempt to sort of put into a format that might work in a report. And I'm just, curious as what you guys think now that we've sort of digested and shared and put things on paper. What you think of the list and what's missing from here, I think, from our list under the Group B map, Carbondale top line tactics is the actual work item, right? The actual actionable item. We have a guiding principle. We have objectives would help meet that guiding principle, but we don't have, an action step. So what I did with the map objectives attachment is just a couple of examples, taking the objectives that we had put on the list and attaching an action step to it. And this is simply created by me. We haven't discussed it. It was just for, discussion purposes and be offered as an example. Is a way we might bring that, bring the whole thing together so that the work projects were connected to objectives and our vision. So with that, I guess I open up to comments or thoughts based on what you guys see here.
I had a thought about continuing to prioritize, of course, but the idea is there's some projects that cross over multiple objectives, and it's kind of, I guess it would look like a 12 or 8-part Venn diagram. So anything that crosses over into all of them, or at least multiple of them, would be ideal. For example, traffic calming, right? That's under multiple different objectives, and
Right.
That's just
That's a nice way to think about maybe prioritizing, right?
Yeah.
The impact would be greater if it crosses over multiple. And Rick, you'd mentioned something about that, I think in an email too, that similar, right? I don't know if it's coming from the same place or.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's some key elements, like I think one of them was changing code and development processes so that it considered many of these objectives that we have for bike ped and transit. So I mean, just it's gonna.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Multiple places,
They
yeah.
go into many places, and that would help guide us in terms of prioritization. Yeah. I think the assumption would be that if they're in many places, that would be the biggest impact. Right.
I think of it like a 3-dimensional spreadsheet kind of. Is that basically what you're saying, I think?
Yeah. I mean, I guess what do we have on the different axes? We have, the guiding principles, the objectives, the action items.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, if we further work this out and where we had, and Kevin, I don't know where FHU is on something like this, or you know, whether it gets incorporated after the fact. I mean, I think something like this takes a lot of input from those of us who are working with it every day and living in the town every day to think about, you know, what are the objectives will really help meet those guiding principles, and how do we then meet those objectives through actions. I don't want it to get too disconnected from actual work items, because I think this report is always wanted a work item list for some reason. So I think but I also think some of those work items might be an intermediate step. You know, it might not be, we're going to tear up that intersection and put a new curb in next month. What we're going to do is plan to do that and why we're doing that. You know, it might be some planning steps in there that would be legitimate action items rather than physical work. That's all. I think this is sort of the work we've done kind of culminates with this list, I think is kind of where I'm at. And not the example on the table, but the list of the
Objectives.
Hmm?
Objectives.
objectives. I mean, that's kind of what we've collectively come up with that I feel should be put into this report. Action items should be put on that, and those things should be put into this report in some way. I don't know if, and I think you guys agree with that? Yeah, or you give me a little bit of a puzzled look, Rick.
I guess it's just awkward since we don't have a map plan yet.
Right,
So
right.
how do we integrate these things together with a map plan? And if I can digress a minute, I'm concerned too with, it feels like we've been hamstrung somewhat by the inability to have additional planning sessions and meetings. And I don't know I'd be interested to know what other, what e-board does. Do you get all this stuff done in one meeting a month, or do we have a way to have additional meetings to work on these issues without having to, I know we have to post them, but without having to meet here and record them, and you know what I mean? So fundamentally, can we get this stuff done?
Oh, you mean, I'm sorry, just giving the timing laid out, giving the comments being received from the e-board and P and Z?
Well, no, I mean, I'm just saying, how do we, when we have a map plan and we're working on the
Yes.
links from action plans to objectives,
Mhm.
how do we have time to do that? We can't do it effectively by meeting once a month.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? So I guess for me, that's a bigger issue than, I think conceptually we have a great idea here, but how do we get it done?
Well, I think that's a fair question. I guess, I don't know. I think what we can agree on though is that, and I think we agree on, and when I say that, I think the Bike Bed Trails Commission agrees that to not have something like this in the plan that would pull it together would be unacceptable, right? So how we get it done, I'm not sure, but let's just agree that, and I'm not putting words with anybody. If anybody thinks otherwise, speak up. But I think a lot of the conversations we've had have kind of brought us to this point.
Yeah.
And so if we feel that the map plan needs this, let's express that. Let's agree on that and let's express that, and then we'll figure out how to deal with it. But I understand the execution is something, yeah.
Well, Kevin, will the map plan have something like this as a part of that final draft?
Yes. I don't know how close it will come to meeting your expectations, but kind of the biggest change that I saw versus some of the things we talked about at the last meeting was actually getting these objectives and noting them with the different pieces of the plan. So I don't think it will be, I gotta remember to lean up.
Yeah.
Sorry. I think there will be components of this. It might not be the exact format, and that's something that we can definitely discuss. But I know the latest copies that I've seen have tried to reorganize like we talked about, and also align these objectives with all the other different pieces graphically. So when you're looking at whether it's, the traffic calming measures, hey, it hits safety, it hits and I think that'll kind of, just by looking at the number of objectives, kind of get to Ally's point of, okay, if you got 7 of them, that's probably a higher priority than 1.
Yeah, so we'll see. And I don't know, I think part of it is not just listing objective with a work product or with an action, but making sure we know why we're doing that work, what we expect to get out of that work, and who's going to do the work, right? I mean, I think a plan needs to hold responsible parties accountable, and we should know exactly why we're doing something, not just by doing this, we meet these 3 guiding principles, right? I think that we want to reverse that process and say, we're doing this to slow traffic and it meets this vision statement, and this is, who's going to do it. I think we've been approaching it sort of from left to right, and we need to go right to left a little bit, if that makes sense.
I feel like we're saying the same thing. I feel like we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Like in whatever format it comes in, we can remap it to fit whatever
I think it's
view we
gonna
want, but
be much easier this time, and there's some additional information about kind of, what did you call that thing that you did, Alex? So like who's responsible?
yeah,
How
and
you,
I think that's the big leap.
That's kind of
That was
the
the
thing.
feedback of this last round, and I just want to see the next report before we kind of get too deep into what we think it should look like.
Mhm.
And, I think we can take it from there and move it. And granted, if we have enough time, but I don't want to have too many prejudgments. I feel like we made pretty clear in the last time FHU was here that we wanted to see a bit more connected of not just guiding principle to project, but also execution of that project and
Right.
what that might look like. So.
Right.
and those kinds of things are in there as well now.
Right.
So-
And Chris and I had a conversation too, I think about, I hope it's all perfect, right? I hope FHU heard us and they've made some changes, and with some tweaking, it can meet all our expectations. But if not, I think we have a decision to make as to what we do with it, right? Do we as a bike ped say we accept this plan? We think the town should accept this plan? Or, you should only accept it with these changes, and let's figure out how to make those changes. But there'll be another chapter here, right?
My assumption is we'll have to do some work. So I think what I was trying to say a few minutes ago is let's plan on that and figure out how we're going to do that.
Right.
I don't expect to get a plan from FHU that we're just going to say, wow, this is awesome, and let's go.
No, I don't either, but
That'd
I
be
do
great,
think,
but
I do
I mean-
think every time we've seen a plan, although it has fallen short, it is also inch closer. So, maybe we'll get closer. We're 2 weeks from seeing the 3rd draft. So we'll have to take that up. I hear you, Rick. We're gonna have to take that up. What do we do with it and how do we do it?
And the other thing I'll throw out is at risk of my own peril, one of Lauren's favorite sayings that I would keep in mind, because this is going to be a long-term updated thing. Don't let perfection get in the way of progress.
Yeah, I
guess
also want something that's really what we thought we needed to guide the town.
I get that.
I guess for me, it's finding a balance. I mean, I expect to do want to do some work to integrate some of these ideas with the final product and make some recommendations to the trustees. And I just don't want to be prepared for us to do that. And I agree. It's not going to be perfect. We get that. It'll be good. And if we can make it a little bit better, we'll do that.
Yeah, I just don't think it's useful to speculate at this point. We'll get the plan, then we'll go from there. We'll take what time we need or put more meetings together if we have to, or, but I think, yeah, at this point, we'll just have to wait and see. And
Right.
it just does take them a long time, I think, to do all the work in between, so.
Okay, two quick items I want to bring up, and Rick reminded me that we've let this drop, but Rick made a comment months ago that we should do a better job reaching out to the community, sort of let them know what we're doing. And I think that's a great idea. And as part of that, offering up sort of a generic Bonedale bikeped@gmail email address where people can reach out to us and connect with us if they want. Just give them another way rather than having to come to a meeting or send emails through the town. And I think it's worth a try. I mean, we've got to set it up. We've got to publicize it. We got to field those emails, and we have to respond to those emails. So, that's the challenging part of that is the management of it. Rather than having, I think the way it works now is somebody has something to say, they send it to Kevin or Kay, and then you guys pass it along to us.
The only thing I would say is if you're gonna set up something like that, it should be set up through the town's email server, just like the Board of Trustees is. Not having a separate email that the town, and that's for open records and that sort of thing.
Where do the, how does it work with the trustees? Is there, who fields, who reads those?
So if somebody goes to the website, and you click on, there's a link to send an email to all of the trustees. They all get it, and whoever chooses to respond can respond.
Can we do that?
If
Do we
you
need any permission or?
That all the time. And usually Ben will respond on behalf of all of the trustees with something that's a little bit boilerplate, but is because we can't have an ongoing reply all meeting.
Right, but at least it gives people a way to communicate directly with a bike ped. And for us to at least say, we got your message, we'll discuss it at the meeting or something like that.
Well, they have a thing to trustees. I don't know if you have a list, you can send it to them, but
Seems doable.
what they're asking is basically to set up
the same thing.
the same thing that would go to the Bike Ped Commission instead of you guys.
I think that would be better to run it through the
Yeah.
town.
But my concern would be getting hundreds of people, I mean, like sending in things kind of like the comments that we sought out for the 133 project, saying, oh, we have to have a roundabout here. No, I hate a roundabouts. We shouldn't have any roundabouts. We need to have this here. We need to, and everybody's got their own opinion about how to solve all the problems. And you get inundated with those kinds of
Yeah.
comments.
We might, but we also might, give people a way to feel a little more connected to what's going on and voice, and I think I would be in favor of trying it and then at least on a trial basis, see what we get. If we're getting inundated with things like that, we can always get rid of it.
I had a question that occurred to me, just thinking about your comment regarding, doing some hands-on work that's going to take more time than just our monthly meetings. The difference between the AFC as a working group versus a commission and their ability to get together, however many of them want to, whenever they wanted to, without any public notice, having some kind of a expanding, I wouldn't necessarily, it's making it a map grassroots kind of a forum or something that might open up more community members to come join and talk about when we get to doing some of the real work kind of things that you're talking about, and that wouldn't necessarily involve having to do public announcements and recording the meetings and all that kind of thing, but having more people getting together with us to do things and to talk about things and maybe solving some of those, public communication issues also.
Yeah, I
Can we
think,
do that? Could we
Well,
put together another grassroots group?
if more than two of you are there, it still has to be a noticed meeting. Anything that you do as a group has to comply with the Colorado open meetings laws, which includes noticing and, reporting back on what's being discussed. Same thing with the email. All of those communications have to be transparent. So if somebody wants to see them, they have to be able to see them. That's the whole point. This is an entity of the town. So if you wanted to have a totally different group that has nothing to do with the town,
If it's got two of us.
if you have two, that's fine. If there's three of you there, that constitutes a meeting. That's a quorum.
Okay.
But I guess the part that doesn't make sense to me, and you know way more about the sunshine laws than I do, is we have no authority. We make no binding
Doesn't matter.
decisions. We
Doesn't
don't-
matter. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
You are an entity, you are representing the town when you get together, regardless of whether or not you're an advisory or a quasi judicial commission.
So what,
Representing the town.
there has been talk in the past about needing to be here so that we can, when we have a planning session, it's, we can tape it. Is that a requirement? Is that something the town, is that required by, does sunshine laws require that, or does the town want us to do that for different reasons?
We have to write, if there's this is a service.
Right.
I don't think that it has to be televised, but it's a service that the town is providing to those community members that want to participate without having to come to town hall.
Mm.
But regardless, even if you guys wanted to meet someplace else, it has to be accessible. You have to be able to provide the members of the public to attend whatever meeting you're gonna have.
Right.
Period. So you can't have it at a restaurant because people can't hear, people can't sit, people feel like they need to buy something. So having a meeting at town hall provides that accessibility to the public.
Are there other commissions that successfully are doing this, that are having subcommittee meetings and regularly? Are there examples?
Not really. I mean, the e-board has subcommittees of 1 and 2 people.
That's it. Okay.
And honestly, sometimes they don't really, have the opportunity to meet because people are busy. So, most people that are participating on these advisory commissions are coming to these meetings, and that's their contribution.
I don't want to get in the weeds
Yeah,
too
let's-
much here, but it does. I wondered when you were talking, Ted, if he was almost suggesting that there's some other structure we could create so that we're not any sort of official town organization, but just this sort of ad hoc advisory group. That might be more productive because we'd have more time,
Could be-
age-friendly, to
Could be
get stuff
done.
done.
Could be done as long as it doesn't
Well-
have at least 3 of us
let's,
participating.
Have to resign from the commission.
yes, there's always that, but I do think there's value in a commission that's connected with the town because, we're entrusted by the town and the trustees to advise. And so I think if you're only running around with, the citizens groups are great. They bring a lot of work and energy and information. But I think it's often good to have an official bridge to the trustees in the decision-making process.
Right.
Can you and I talk about setting up that email?
Mhm.
Okay, why don't we do that? And then hopefully that we can do that. And I guess the idea would be that if anybody writes an email, it would go to that, it would be distributed to everybody. We have to figure out, we're not all going to respond. We don't want all of us to respond. We'll have to figure out how the bike ped will take that information and respond to that person.
And that's totally fine. correct me if I'm wrong, but any response should be copied to either me or Kay.
Why don't we
Because
see,
then
why don't we
it
see if we can get
becomes-
it set up and then
Yeah.
we'll go through the rules around that. Okay.
I don't, the trustees do it. There's no reason you guys can't do it.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any problem with that.
Kevin, when we first brought it up months ago, the other concern you had was that you didn't want, public works items to be coming to us when they should be going to you. And if it's a repair issue or a town, maintenance issue, that you could react to quickly instead of us getting involved. So we just have some disclaimer in there, a reminder that these kinds of things,
Yeah.
certain things go to you and certain things,
Yeah.
feedback would go to us.
There's always going to be, no good deed goes unpunished. So you're going to have situations where there may be a miscommunication. I think you just accept that. Yeah, a disclaimer's fine, like, hey, if this is an immediate safety issue, call
Right.
or email Kevin, don't bring it to the board's attention. If you want to talk about policy and planning and that sort of stuff, let us have it.
Right.
Setting up some easy canned response for different types of things we expect will come in. We can kind of plan for some of those and some new ones will come up and we can just operationalize a couple new ones as they show up.
I think the biggest struggle is not saving the debate engagement for this forum.
And I do think just having a bit more of a public conduit may give us more topics to bring to these.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. That's a good point. And I think it's consistent with your point, Rick, overall of having better outreach from our commission to the community. So that they feel they can connect with us without having to spend a Tuesday evening or Monday evening coming in here once a month. And I think it's a great idea. I think we should try it,
Well, several people have said to me, including Craig, who's here, is that, we're doing all this work and we've been doing it for a year, but we haven't really conveyed to the public what we're doing. And so there's a lot of people out there that gave us input a year ago, 15 months ago, that have no idea where we are in this process. And we've done a poor job, I think, of conveying that. And we need to, whatever that is, an ad in the Super Sun, a couple of letters to the editor.
Yeah, no, I think we need to come up with something. Yeah. Go, yeah.
I was just gonna suggest so you don't get a lot of emails that go back to last summer, that you have some language just letting people know where we are and what's useful now in terms of input, because otherwise, yeah, you'll be getting requests for Roundabout some other place or whatever, but.
Right.
Have a plan in hand, and that's a newsworthy item that the newspaper will report on and whatnot. And hopefully, it's a little bit hard. This meeting is at a hard time because it's sort of like in limbo. Like there's so much stuff to come that will require a lot of work, and I think it's good to have the option open of, it sounds like maybe the easiest thing is maybe expanding meetings a little bit more into, maybe it's a little longer and has an open house component to it or something, or has a, whatever you need to add on to it, to the meeting. Maybe if you feel like you need to do I know the B board had a couple of times that they broke out into their little subcommittees during the meeting and just to talk about specific
Things that way. Yeah.
But they had a main meeting for an hour and then they had another half hour of.
Other than, I appreciate that. Other than, Rick, letters to the local paper or KD&K outreach or setting up our booths at different places. I don't know if other people have any ideas they want to share, or maybe they can think about that. We can bring it up, talk a little bit, at the next meeting. But one thing that occurs to me, and I don't know if this has been done or possible, but they have a bike ped page on the website. Is that something that's ever been talked about, or
There is one.
there is one?
Mhm.
Isn't it just who the members are and what the meeting's agenda is?
It can be whatever you want.
Okay,
Yeah, there's no.
okay.
Be nice to have links to like the literature you guys have made. There's probably PDFs of things you've made in the past.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real easy way, an official way to do it. We have want to let the public know what we're doing, go to the tab on the town website.
The other thing I might throw out there, if you want to work on it over the next couple weeks, is if you're talking specific about getting information out about MAP, if one of you guys or a couple of you want to take a stab at something to put in the newsletter that we do, that goes out November 1st. And we can dress it up with, and for the latest version of Map Carbondale, you can go to, the,
Carbondale Connect.
yeah, that one.
Good one.
But,
All right.
you could talk about what's happened, where we're at, what's coming up. Let people know, hey, there's a meeting at the 3rd Street Center on November 4th or whatever the day is. And, it'll be, Map Carbondale will be as part of the agenda, but it also lives over here on Carbondale Connects. So,
Okay,
and usually if we can have that dialed in and to Anna before,
October 18th.
when?
October 18th.
18th. I thought you said 8th, which is,
sometime around there.
yeah, I think we could, that's a great idea. Thank you, Kevin, for that. Yeah. All right. So
And-
those are good starts, right? Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely something I think that is a good thing to think about more holistically too, in terms of, I know the e-board has talked about this a fair amount of just, like thinking about what is your communication strategy
Yeah.
and maybe building some little bite-sized things that could be put in on a bi-monthly basis into the newsletter, or something that's like a pre-made reminder about helmets or something. Like the e-board, I think, has been tossing around making sort of tips, environmental tips or whatever that could go in different venues, but you could kind of recycle them to some degree and
Okay.
use them for these, especially as the newsletter doesn't have very many people yet too. So hopefully we can also get people to sign up for it. And
Right.
make it.
Okay. Great.
And is there a reason maybe that we don't just say, hey, every quarter we submit an article to Soper Sun? It's just a quarterly, they can count on it. We can kind of assign each other so that, maybe only one of us is writing one a year, but that it's scheduled and we know we'll just continue with that.
Yeah, no, I think there's no reason we can't do that. We need, there's 4 quarters. So we need 4 people that are willing and able. Yeah, let's figure that out. I think that's also a good way to approach this.
And I did want to say, I kind of agree with Rick, even before Rick was bringing up of subcommittees or target groups, is it really does feel like for us to really get things done, and it could be an extended meeting, but let's say for 133, I think it would be good to have some number of people sit down and really ponder from Went, let's say, to Village, that, there are X number of people who are interested in looking at this and really progressing with it so that it actually does happen. And it could just be the same thing with MAP, like Matt, what you were working on, a few people saying, okay, we've got these objectives, we want to build it out once the map is, completed. You almost need some time and, a few people to bring it together. And I think it is worth trying to figure out, how do we do this so we do progress?
Okay. Any thoughts, comments on any of that? Okay. I think we're adjourned. Thank you guys, Andy and David, for logging in from wherever you are.
Yep.
And thank you, everybody, for participating and setting it up, and we're adjourned. Thanks.
All right. Thank you all.
Next one will be exciting.